The 20th century was a time of incredible change. Unspeakable horrors and amazing leaps of scientific discovery. It was a century where we showed what we are truly capable of. The pure imagination of artistic expression. The insidious desire to harm and oppress. The will to fight against the weight of a prevailing status quo. The drive to understand the universe and to improve our lives. A century made by leaders and revolutionaries, scientists and thinkers, artists, icons, heroes, and villains. We will count down through the 101 figures of the 20th century who have shaped the world in which we live, and whose stories form the tapestry of our history. On this episode,
Tim Berners-Lee's invention of the web fundamentally changed the kind of online world we have.
It was a huge change in Pakistan to suddenly have this 30-something woman prime minister.
He was cheeky. He didn't respect authority. That really appealed to people.
In the 1950s, America was tuning into their television sets when a young performer from Memphis appeared, redefining pop music. On June 5th, 1956, Elvis Presley appeared on The Milton Berle Show, broadcast across the nation, performing his new single, Hound Dog.
Hound Dog was the big breakthrough for Elvis. It was a Jerry Lieber, Mike Stoller song that had been the biggest selling R&B record of 1953 in the original version by Big Mama Thornton. But the rhythm and blues world was a corner of segregated America that had no reach into the mainstream culture.
Elvis's performance was upbeat and catchy. Then the band changed tempo, slowing it down until it took on a teasing, sensual edge. Gyrating hips and sultry vocals that became a staple of his performances, Elvis had the audience in the palm of his hand.
In a moment, he imprinted his incredible style, his charismatic personality. It just blew out the radio speakers in 1956. There was nothing like it.
Gentlemen, I don't think I'm revealing any secrets when I say that Elvis Presley is the fastest rising young singer in the entertainment industry today.
Later that year, Elvis's first feature film, Love Me Tender, was released. A string of TV appearances followed. Elvis had truly arrived.
Elvis the Pelvis Presley, king of rock and roll, returns to Tupelo, Mississippi. The local girls went crazy. One leapt on the stage and the cops had to stop her from jumping on his blue suede shoes.
His sound and performance style heralded a new era in music, the era of the rebel. With his musical and film career reaching massive heights, Elvis was enlisted into the U.S. Army in 1958.
Elvis Presley has just been awarded call-up papers, and it's into the barbershop. It's the barbershop rock that really knocked Presley.
Rather than using his celebrity to dodge the draft, he attended military training and was deployed overseas.
It's good to rough it, to put yourself to a test, to see if you can take it.
In 1961, Elvis returned to his career, starring in a string of new films, releasing new chart-topping songs, and constantly touring. He seemed unstoppable. By the late 1970s, Elvis was in tragic decline. Overweight and struggling to keep up with his demanding performance schedule up until his death in 1977. During his career, Elvis made 31 films, recorded 90 albums, and charted 149 singles, with 18 reaching #1 on the Billboard chart. Since his death, Elvis's persona has grown to a near mythic status. Elvis sightings, Elvis impersonators, Elvis festivals, his influence is not only present in popular music, but in the persistence of his own image in popular culture.
Elvis Presley was the embodiment of rock and roll. He taught everyone how to be a rock and roll star. And there is nothing that can diminish his importance to this movement.
He would devise a simple, practical concept, captivating generations of adults and children alike, leading to a global toy empire built with tiny plastic bricks. Ole Kirk Christensen was a struggling furniture maker in Denmark during the Great Depression, when he began to make wooden children's toys from leftover scraps of wood. Christiansen named these toys after a shortened version of the Danish words "leg godt," or play well. In 1949, Christiansen introduced his first range of Lego automatic binding bricks, capitalizing on new materials to create an ingeniously simple design.
Here we have this concept, and the difference is that suddenly plastic's available. So he was able to create colorful blocks that children could put into different shapes. And this really appealed to a whole new way of building.
The name was shortened to Lego bricks in 1953. At an English toy fair the following year, a toy buyer lamented to Christensen that there was no toy system available. Christiansen knew this was a need he could fill, creating a series of Lego products that could be bought separately, but which would all work together. He was so meticulous about the interlocking nature of Lego that a brick from 1958 would still connect to a brick made today.
I think fundamentally, children love to build. And you think that child's playing, but what he or she is really doing is learning physics. They're learning engineering, what stays up, what falls down, what you have to do. So Lego is part of that history.
Ole Kirk Christensen died in March 1958, but his invention continued to expand under the direction of his son, Gottfried. By the mid-1980s, the Lego brand had truly exploded. Around 68 million children worldwide were spending 5 billion hours a year playing with Lego. Since the first Lego minifigure was released in 1978, over 4 billion have been made, making it the world's largest population group. There is now an average of 86 Lego bricks to every person on Earth. While Christiansen may not have lived to see the incredible success his invention would enjoy, his legacy lives in the massive and ever-expanding empire he began.
It's endured because I think it's a great product. The quality is very, very precise. And it's probably one of the greatest tools for play ever invented.
Ole Kirk Christensen took the simple concept of interlocking plastic bricks and turned it into the most dominant and recognizable toy system in the world. Her courage broke through one of the most unbreakable barriers in politics, leaving an enduring legacy for her country. Educated at Harvard and Oxford universities, Benazir Bhutto was a daughter of Pakistani politics. Her father, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, was Prime Minister of Pakistan from 1971 until 1977, when he was deposed in a military coup.
I think the question on everyone's minds is, will Mr. Bhutto be hanged?
All I will stress on this, that justice must be done.
In 1978, he was executed by the country's new military dictatorship. Benazir rose to lead her father's party. Between 1979 and 1984, she was frequently under house arrest. But this didn't deter her.
At 35, this Oxford-educated politician could become the first woman in history to lead an Islamic nation. She wants democracy for the people after 11 years of martial law.
In 1988, the nation responded, electing Benazir Bhutto as their new Prime Minister.
It was a huge change in Pakistan, having been governed by men. To suddenly have this 30-something woman Prime Minister who had just had her first baby. And so she was a sort of breath of fresh air in Pakistan, and people expected a lot of change from her.
Bhutto may have carried the hopes of her people, but her relationship with the establishment and the military was fraught.
She always felt they didn't want her, that they were very entrenched, and that they saw her as somebody that would jeopardize all of their sort of old ways, and she felt that they were out to get her from the start.
Pakistan was rife with corruption and crime. Under Bhutto's leadership, this didn't change, and she proved unable to improve poor living conditions and widespread poverty. Public opinion began to shift. Faced with accusations of corruption, Benazir's government was dismissed by the President of Pakistan in August 1990. She was elected Prime Minister again in 1993, but her government only survived for another 3 years. Bhutto was never able to complete a term in government. By the late 1990s, she would be forced to live in exile.
My own exposure to politics in Pakistan is that it's very mean, it's very underhand, and not only that, in our country, people resort to murder, and I think the price is far too heavy.
She was right. In 2007, Benazir Bhutto was campaigning to be returned to government when she was assassinated. Her political career was plagued with obstacles and opposition from the prevailing forces in her country. Despite this, Benazir Bhutto continued to fight for democracy until her death, leaving a lasting influence on her country.
Benazir's very important legacy in Pakistan is for women, because it showed women in Pakistan that you could be Prime Minister in an Islamic country. I think that Benazir was the most courageous person I've ever met in my life.
It began with a simple solution for information management, which grew into one of the most important inventions of the century, creating a more connected world than ever before. Tim Berners-Lee was working at the CERN Institute in Switzerland in 1989 when he came across a problem.
CERN is a way a microcosm of the rest of the world, because it has lots and lots of people coming from all over the place. They had all kinds of different documentation systems and formats for their documents. So there was a real need to do the integration of the system. If the World Wide Web was a mold, this was a great petri dish to get it growing in.
Berners-Lee made a proposal for a new system. He would harness the networking capability of the internet, around since the 1970s, to pull information from a central point and display it on any computer.
As the name implies, Internet is a network of computers linking universities and other research centers around the United States and even across the globe.
It was clear by the late 80s, when he started on the web, that there would be massive numbers of people online. But there was no single standard, just this kind of feudal chaos of different online systems for navigating information.
In conceiving one consistent system to bring all of this together, Berners-Lee programmed the building blocks of the World Wide Web as it is known today, along with the coding language used to display, transfer, and link information.
The internet is basically the plumbing, the wires, the routers that connect computers together. The web is the program that we see and interact with that lets us find things, do things over that network. You can think of networks like the internet as connecting computers. They don't need people. Online systems like the web are navigation systems that connect people over a network.
By the end of 1990, Berners-Lee had launched his new system at the CERN Institute. The following year, it was made accessible to the public with a free basic web browser available to download.
Tim Berners-Lee's invention of the web and its success fundamentally changed the kind of online world we have.
Tim Berners-Lee devised a method for turning a network of connecting devices into the dominant means of accessing information worldwide. And he gave it away for free, to be used, expanded on, evolved, and shared by the world. It is not only the power of his invention, but also the gift he gave to humanity that made Tim Berners-Lee one of the most important figures of the information age. A record-holding tennis player, a defector from the iron fist of communism, an outspoken activist for gay rights. Communist Czechoslovakia in the early 1970s was tightly controlled by the Soviet Union. There was no freedom at home, and little hope of being allowed to travel beyond its borders. For a talented 18-year-old girl wanting to compete on the international tennis circuit, there was only one choice: defect. Martina Navratilova left her country to compete in the 1975 US Open, knowing she was not going to return, instead defecting to the United States, leaving behind a family she would not see again for another 4 years.
What about your plans for the future now?
Well, I'm just going to continue to play on the tour and as much as I want, and whenever I want and wherever I want.
3 years after her defection, Navratilova won her first Grand Slam at Wimbledon. She would win at Wimbledon another 8 times in the next 12 years.
Martina Navratilova dominated tennis because of her style of play. She was a serve volleyer, which at the time was quite unusual in women's tennis. They were normally baseline players, and she was so exciting to watch because she was so different.
Martina Navratilova holds 167 career singles titles and 177 doubles titles, which are all-time records for any player, male or female. Her career spanned decades, ranked in the top 10 every year from 1974 to 1994. Her achievements on the court are only a small part of what she has accomplished.
Outside of sport, Martina Navratilova had an enormous impact in the sense where she was outspoken about gay rights, and she wasn't afraid to, if you like, come out of the closet. She was never really in the closet. She was always very comfortable in who she was. And at the time in the 80s, it was a very brave stance. It affected her. She lost a lot of endorsements, but she wasn't afraid to speak her truth.
Our goal must be equality across the board because we can settle for nothing less. We deserve nothing less.
She gave voice to an important issue and refused to shy away from accepting all aspects of her identity, challenging others to accept her as she was.
Being a lesbian is not an accomplishment. It is what I am, nothing more and nothing less.
Here today, the famed scientist Dr. George Washington Carver carries on his research. Born a slave, Dr. Carver has made important discoveries which are being used to the benefit not only of his own race, but the industry and agriculture of all the South.
George Washington Carver arrived at the Tuskegee Institute as a teacher and researcher in 1896. He remained there until his death in 1943. When Carver began teaching at the end of the 19th century, the South was still heavily reliant on its cotton-growing industry. But repeatedly planting a single crop had taken its toll. Soils were depleted, and erosion was increasing, destroying farmers' livelihoods. Carver solved this problem by encouraging growers to plant different crops among them peanuts and sweet potatoes. To create a market for the new produce, Carver set about discovering as many uses for them as possible.
The work of Dr. Carver is well known. While at Tuskegee, he has contributed much to the science of nutrition. Using an improved process, these scientists get more alcohol from the plentiful sweet potato than ever before.
Developing 300 products derived from peanuts and 118 products derived from sweet potato. His work on crop diversification and soil preservation is widely considered to have saved agriculture in the South. Carver was also an early innovator in the field of genetic engineering, cross-pollinating different species of plants by hand in his laboratory. Carver's work earned him a reputation, and he was regularly sought out for his knowledge and advice. By the late 1930s, Henry Ford had started corresponding with Carver, interested in the industrial uses for plants like soybeans. The pair worked on developing biofuels derived from plants. While it didn't take hold at the time, it was another example of Carver's vision. Ford was not the only person to value Carver's important work. He advised Mahatma Gandhi's supporters on nutrition between hunger strikes, and American President Theodore Roosevelt on the nation's agricultural matters. He was even invited by Joseph Stalin to oversee cotton plantations in Russia in 1931, an invitation he turned down. Carver was one of the most prominent and prolific agricultural scientists in the world. Carver's support for sustainable agriculture and renewable resources put him years ahead of his contemporaries. His work and his vision more relevant today than ever before. The year was 1985. Cold War tensions had been increasing through the early part of the decade. The Soviet Union continued to increase their military strength, when a new leader was elected, bringing an agenda of reform that would change the world. Mikhail Gorbachev came to power with a plan to transform the Soviet Union into a modern social democracy. It hinged on two main concepts: glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, or restructuring.
It's of course very interesting that he comes really directly out of the Communist Party apparatus, but he's got these ideas about reform.
Gorbachev sought a more productive, less wasteful Soviet Union.
If the Soviet economy is to recover, Gorbachev desperately needs to switch resources away from defense and into areas like food production. For this reason, he's widely expected to woo Western European leaders.
Instead of fueling the war machine, Gorbachev also chose to develop a better relationship with the United States.
If the citizens of the United States had any doubts about the Soviet leader's charm, they were dispelled by this spontaneous walkabout on the streets of Washington. A far cry from the traditional image of the Soviet leadership as dour and distant men in drab grey suits.
A series of meetings with US President Reagan led to an historic nuclear weapons treaty in December 1987.
We have listened to the wisdom in an old Russian maxim, doverye no proverye, trust but verify.
Каждой встрече вы это повторяете.
You repeat that at every meeting.
Gorbachev had a really big role in ending the Cold War. Of course, so did Reagan. It's the two of them, essentially. The two of them managing to find common ground.
In 1989, Gorbachev held elections where Communist Party members had to run against non-party members for the first time. State power was handed over to the Soviet Union's first democratically elected parliament. Gorbachev was elected as the country's first president. His reforms signaled a new ideology, with a reluctance to resort to military intervention. Soviet nations responded, many announcing plans to break away from communism. By the time Gorbachev resigned the presidency on Christmas Day 1991, the Berlin Wall had come down, and many of the nation-states had declared independence. There was effectively no Soviet Union left to govern.
His legacy is a strange one because on the one hand, in the West, we really like him, admire him, feel he's a sort of moral exemplar. The other thing to stress is how much in Russia people dislike him still. They see him simply as the man who brought Russia into disrepute, who caused the breakup of the Soviet Union, who ended that period when we were respected in the world, and now what?
Under Gorbachev's leadership, the structures and ideology of the Soviet Union were completely reformed.
It's not so often that we have a political leader who does something for what appear to be moral reasons. Usually they pay for it, but there is a certain grandeur about it.
The cost was the end of one of the greatest powers of the 20th century. But Gorbachev's actions led his country and the world away from the brink of disaster. She took her first plane ride at an air show in 1920 and knew she was destined to fly. A daring pioneer of aviation, a celebrity in her lifetime, and an enduring hero. Amelia Earhart bought her first airplane when she was 23 years old. Just over a year later, she was setting records. In October 1922, she flew her plane to 14,000 feet, the world altitude record for a female pilot. Her career in aviation had begun. When aviator Charles Lindbergh made a successful solo flight from New York to Paris in May 1927, the act would change Amelia Earhart's life. Interest in a woman making the same flight grew. Finally, Earhart answered the call. In June 1928, she took off from Newfoundland as a passenger in a plane flown by two male pilots. The belief at the time was that it was too dangerous for a woman to make the flight across the Atlantic herself. When the flight was a success, it was Earhart who was celebrated across America.
The reception at City Hall, she gets another great welcome, even though she still claims she didn't do such an awful lot. But the world honors her courage and skill.
She used her growing fame to campaign for commercial air travel, but still wasn't content to sit on the sidelines. One of her greatest feats as an aviator came in 1932, when she made the lonely solo flight across the Atlantic. The first woman to make the flight alone. She would follow this with a crossing of the Pacific Ocean.
She deserves the welcome she gets, for no other woman and no man has flown both the Pacific and Atlantic solo.
Amelia Earhart was an incredibly accomplished aviator, but her final flight was plagued with problems. On the 1st of June 1937, Amelia Earhart and her co-pilot Fred Noonan flew out of Miami, Florida, on an attempt to circumnavigate the globe.
Amelia Earhart ready for her great aerial adventure, a round-the-world flight by way of the equator, a journey no pilot has yet attempted.
During the final stretch across the Pacific Ocean, the plane disappeared. A $4 million search funded by the US government turned up no trace of the plane or its crew.
An intensive air-sea search got underway immediately, but not even wreckage was ever found.
In 1939, Amelia Earhart was declared legally dead. Theories about her mysterious demise have persisted for decades.
Such as the possibility she wandered to the island of Truk, then being secretly fortified by the Japanese, and was executed to keep those plans secret.
Stories of face cream and plane windows found on South Sea islands fuel the mystery of her disappearance. The true fate of Amelia Earhart remains unsolved, but her place in history as a daring pioneer of aviation is assured. And as an aspirational figure for women in her field, determined to champion the notion that women can and should attempt anything. The Suez Canal, precious pathway for oil out of the Middle East. controlled by the powers of Europe since 1869. What they couldn't control was the power of a nation that wanted its independence. In 1952, Egyptian Army Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser orchestrated a coup to depose his king and declare the country a republic. General Naguib was installed as their first president.
General Naguib was the front man of that uprising, but the power behind the scenes was the man on the left, Gamal Abdel Nasser.
2 years later, President Naguib was removed from power and Nasser declared himself prime minister, declaring Egypt an Arab socialist state not aligned with either of the two dominant Cold War systems, communism or democratic capitalism.
This was the first time that Egypt was able to free itself, and the declaration of Egypt as a nationalist Arab state to really fulfilled one of the important yearnings on the part of many Egyptians to be free and independent of colonial control.
Except they still didn't have the Suez Canal. Operations and the money earned from shipping were controlled by a company that was mostly British and French owned. The canal was the last symbol of colonialism in Egypt. Nasser wanted autonomy for his country. So in July 1956, in the main square of Alexandria, in front of 100,000 Egyptians, Nasser made a public announcement. He was nationalizing the Suez Canal Company, returning control of operations and the money that came with it to Egypt.
And that really elevated Nasser almost overnight into an Arab hero for the many Arabs who wanted to really see Arab control over the natural resources and over their countries in the region.
To France and Britain, who until that moment had controlled the canal, this was a blow to their power.
True, it runs through Egypt, but it is not vital to Egypt, as it is to many other countries. Our quarrel is not with Egypt. It is with Colonel Nasser.
By late October 1956, diplomatic attempts to return control to a neutral agency had failed. France, Britain, and Israel invaded Egypt, occupying the Suez Canal by force.
This was an invasion which was not really supported by the international community, and that was really quite really damaging to the reputation of Britain, but certainly a major political victory for Nasser.
Under pressure from the international community, the invading forces were withdrawn from the canal in December 1956, returning the Suez Canal to the Egyptians. The military aggression lasted less than 2 months, but the ripples would be felt for decades to come. A charismatic speaker who captured the popular imagination of his people, Gamal Abdel Nasser dominated politics in the region through the 1950s and 60s. By nationalizing the Suez Canal, Nasser asserted the autonomy of his nation and the Arab world, standing up to the dominant forces of the day and removing the last remaining presence of British control from Egypt. He forever altered the balance of world power. A vaudeville actor who would go on to create the most enduring character in film. Beloved by audiences, he brought humanity and humor to some of America's darkest days. Charlie Chaplin created his iconic character, the Tramp, through ingenious costuming. Loose pants and oversized shoes, a tight jacket, and a tiny hat, with a cane and an unusual walk, with a small moustache so his face wouldn't be hidden while performing. The Tramp was one of the most recognizable and popular features of the silent screen era.
He was cheeky. He didn't respect authority. And I think that sense of irreverence, that really appealed to people. He was a new kind of screen hero.
The character debuted in 1914. But it wasn't until the film The Tramp, released the following year, that Chaplin had perfected the version known today.
People saw almost instantly that he had a screen presence which was unique. And within 6 months, he's making film after film. And within a year, if you don't have a Chaplin film in your cinema, you're at a serious disadvantage.
Chaplin made over 35 films at Keystone Pictures. In 1919, he moved on to form his own company.
Douglas Fairbanks, D.W. Griffith, Mary Pickford, and Charlie Chaplin form United Artists Company.
Their goal was creative control over their projects. Chaplin continued to make films starring the Tramp, his other film roles showing traces of his signature character. In 1940, Chaplin made perhaps his most recognizable and controversial film. Referencing the physical similarities between the Tramp and Adolf Hitler, he produced and starred in the satire The Great Dictator.
What Chaplin moved towards in his later feature-length films was a kind of real understanding of pathos. He understood what gets us emotionally involved with the situation of the characters.
Chaplin spent most of the 1950s out of the public eye. By the 1960s, though, his work was enjoying a renewed interest. And in 1972, he was awarded an honorary Academy Award for the incalculable effect he has had in making motion pictures the art form of this century.
He had a universal fame beyond imagination, beyond belief. He was as popular in Russia, in India, as he was all over Europe and all over America. I can't think of a single country in the world that remained immune to Chaplin's charm.
Chaplin used comedy to explore the social and political issues of his time, but created a character that was timeless. He played a crucial role in the development of film during its infancy. His focus on story and on a strong creative direction were pivotal in turning film from a curiosity of the 1890s into the dominant storytelling medium of the 20th century. An Argentinian doctor who traveled Latin America before finding his purpose as a revolutionary. Charismatic and appealing, he would become a lasting icon of the movement. A pivotal moment in Che Guevara's life came in 1955 when he met Fidel Castro, eventual leader of Cuba's socialist revolution. Guevara fought alongside Castro for over 2 years of guerrilla warfare against the Batista dictatorship in Cuba, proving himself a valuable strategist.
Che Guevara has now worked himself into one of the top spots in the 26th of July movement. He is in command of many troops and exercises a Rasputin-like influence over Castro.
Because he's Argentinian, he's not Cuban, and yet he's staked his life for the revolution, he becomes a very particularly important figure. He's also a very attractive figure. He was a man that had a highly attractive personality. He's casting a huge shadow on Fidel Castro.
Beneath the romantic figure is a darker side to Guevara, which emerged during the Cuban Revolution.
Multiple sources report during his time in Cuba took great pleasure in applying the coup de grace to the victims of Castro's firing squads. I mean, that is a real stain on Guevara.
When Castro finally triumphed in 1959, Guevara remained in Cuba. But he was an ineffective administrator, growing increasingly disheartened with the state of Cuba and their dependency on the Soviet Union. So he moved on to other revolutions, eventually ending up in Bolivia in 1966. Joining a small band of guerrilla fighters, he lasted barely a year before being wounded in an attack by the Bolivian army. An attack backed by the CIA. Guevara was captured and killed.
I think what happened to Guevara and his death in Bolivia is perfect symmetry of the man. He begins a young idealist. He resents all this bureaucracy that he finds in Cuba. He makes a dismal president of the National Bank, even worse minister of industry, which isn't surprising given his own background as a doctor. And he basically wants to continue in the heat of the struggle for a world revolution. And what does he do? He chooses probably the most obscure country in Latin America, whose struggle for revolution was already almost lost. And he chooses to go there and lead a band of rural guerrillas. I think it was a death wish. I think it was partly a death wish.
His death at only 39 years old fueled the mythology of Che Guevara. His status as an icon of revolution heightened by one single image, taken by Cuban photographer Alberto Corda in 1960 at a memorial ceremony for the victims of a ship explosion in Havana. The image has since been perpetuated throughout the world, repeated, reworked, revisioned.
That image, I think, did a lot towards Guevara's cult of personality, but I think it's been cemented and advanced by his death. I think he will outlive Fidel Castro in terms of the endurance of that image. Most young people who wear him on their shirts or on their beer cans or whatever, they no longer associate him with communism. It's much bigger. It's that rebelliousness of youth that Guevara would stand for.
His passion for astronomy would lead him to make some of the most important discoveries in history, forever altering our understanding of the universe. Edwin Hubble returned from World War I in 1919 to work at the Mount Wilson Observatory in California. They had just installed a telescope that would make Hubble's work possible.
Within this 750-ton dome is the 100-inch Hooker reflector. This is the world's largest telescope.
Hubble would use this new technology to seek beyond the edges of our galaxy.
Some people thought that our galaxy was all there was, that we lived in this island galaxy in the middle of nothingness. Hubble, in his first set of measurements, figured out that our galaxy is one of many.
It began with a single star, spotted in a nebula beyond the Milky Way. Hubble measured the distance to the star, establishing that it was 1 million light-years away, far beyond the edges of our galaxy, revealing that what were previously thought to be nebula were in fact other galaxies. He began to measure these newly discovered galaxies in relation to each other and to our galaxy, the Milky Way.
And what he found is that these galaxies were all moving away from us, and the further away they were, the faster they were moving away. And it turns out that if you have this relationship, which is the further away an object is, the faster it's moving away from us, that's the hallmark of an expanding universe.
With this discovery in 1929, Hubble completely blew away conventional opinion about the static nature of the universe, proving a prediction of Einstein's general theory of relativity that Einstein himself had doubted was possible. The relationship of receding galaxies is now known as Hubble's law.
Hubble's discovery of the recession of galaxies is hugely important. It is one of the great scientific discoveries of the 20th century. A lot of what we do in cosmology is trying to repeat that level of discovery and that level of excitement.
Through his work, Hubble significantly reframed our understanding of the universe and our place in it. Hubble's legacy lives on, not only in the fundamental importance of his discoveries, but in his namesake, the Hubble telescope, the first major optical telescope to be launched into space.
Were he still alive, Hubble would be excited at the endless discoveries likely to be made as modern astronomers prepare to take a step across a new celestial threshold.
Discovery, go for Hubble release.
It sits high above the Earth, seeking the far reaches of the universe, recording the wonders and details of other galaxies. Galaxies we know to seek out thanks to Edwin Hubble. wartime commander turned president. He was a talented military strategist who hated war. In 1941, the United States was at war. Dwight Eisenhower, a career military man, was appointed to the Army's War Plans Division. He had a reputation as an excellent tactician and was liked and trusted by those who knew him. A rare combination of talent and humility helped him rise through the ranks to general of the US Army. Eisenhower headed some of the most important Allied offensives during the war, none more significant than his role as Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, leading the operation to cross the English Channel into France on June 6, 1944. The Normandy invasion was the largest amphibious attack in history, using naval ships to launch a land and air offensive. Less than a year after the invasion, Germany had surrendered.
This unconditional surrender has been achieved by teamwork. Teamwork not only among all the Allies participating, but among all the services, land, sea, and air. To every subordinate that has been in this command of almost 5 million Allies, I owe a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid.
At the end of the war, Eisenhower returned to the US to a hero's welcome. In June 1952, he found a new purpose, retiring from the Army to campaign for election as the next American president. He was a tireless campaigner, despite being 61 years old, projecting a warmth and sincerity that, coupled with his military distinctions, endeared him to the public. He easily won the election, with his vice presidential candidate Richard Nixon. Eisenhower served 2 terms as president from 1953 until 1961. As president, he actively pursued peace, once stating, "I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can, only as one who has seen its brutality, its stupidity."
If we believe in our own system, if we practice what we preach, if we provide upright leadership, we can help to show the world the folly of war.
One of his first acts was to negotiate an armistice to end the Korean War. He was also a supporter of the civil rights movement, signing into law the Civil Rights Act of 1957, the first legislation protecting the rights of African Americans in the 20th century. And in September 1957, Eisenhower responded to Arkansas Governor Orville E. Forbes' threats to prevent the desegregation of the local high school in Little Rock by sending federal troops to ensure that integration took place. In his final speech as president, Eisenhower warned of the dangers of what he called the military-industrial complex, relinquishing too much influence to the industry of war.
I confess that I laid down my official responsibilities in this field with a definite sense of disappointment. As one who knows that another war could utterly destroy this civilization, which has been so slowly and painfully built over thousands of years, I wish I could say tonight that a lasting peace is in sight. Happily, I can say that war has been avoided. Steady progress toward our ultimate goal has been made, but so much remains to be done.
Faced with the Cold War, the presidents who followed Eisenhower did not heed his warnings. Over the decades since he left office, a closer inspection of Eisenhower's work showed a man who used his hidden hand to gently diffuse tensions and build relationships. He led the Allies to victory on the battlefields of World War II, but his greatest accomplishment was his pursuit of peace.